Well, hello there. Welcome to the first Have I Got Jam for You in a little while. We're back. Hopefully there'll be lots more as well. So basically, I have a chat with a guest, and we go where I'll say go where the music takes us. We go where the conversation takes us, which is the jamming bit. So before we start, if anybody is actually watching on Facebook and they would like to comment, can I please ask you to go to this URL? Basically, it just means that instead of being Facebook user, we know what your name is, and it's much nicer. But if you're anywhere else on LinkedIn, on YouTube, or whatever, if you want to ask a question or you want to comment, just use the comments, and we'll pick that up here. So today, my first guest for a long time is, let's reveal him, drum roll please, is Kuldip Sandhu. Kuldip, hello.
Hello. Hello, Derek.
I won't bother saying, I won't bother describing exactly who you are, because the sort of invite thing says, but yeah, you're used to dealing with the sorts of people that we want to talk to, or are hoping to talk to, which is the sort of people who sit around a boardroom table and have a multitude of problems, from whatever. I mean, you're an
Absolutely.
expert in change and transformation. I do stuff with change and innovation, so that's the sort of stuff we're going to talk about. So if anybody on the way through has any questions for either of us, please do pop them in the comments, and we'll have a look and try and answer them. So, Kuldip, what are we going to
Hello.
start with then? What are we going to
Well,
start with?
firstly, thank you and a big welcome and a thank you for having me on to talk to you about maybe some of the lessons I've learned, some of the experiences I've been through, um, and making this free flowing because I tend to go to lots of conferences and events and they're kind of staged. They're kind of staged, and there's a protocol to go through. So it's great to just, I was going to say ad lib, but just talk as things emerge from our conversations and questions that we might have. So it's quite good to do that in the jamming way, if you want to call
In
it.
in the jamming way, not many people jam or riff around the boardroom table. Some do, but hey.
Yeah,
So what's first?
yeah,
How can we stimulate any possible viewers, or even stimulate ourselves?
well, I'll throw a question at you,
You throw a
Derek.
question at me, and I'll throw
You're
one back at you, and we'll see how heated it gets.
Yeah, so look, with the intro that you said, I do work in that transformation space, change, and I, be they small, medium, large enterprises, organizations, family-owned businesses to SMEs, they all find it hard to change and transform. Um, with your experience, why do you think that is? What are those inhibitors? What are those core challenges to shift the needle with these organizations? What's your thoughts around that?
Very good question. I know one of the problems definitely is the small, uh, say the smaller family-owned businesses is definitely the big thing. Now, one of the things that I guess most of us have seen, you've seen the innovation adoption curve. You know, that sort of normal distribution where you have innovators and early adopters at one end and the laggards at the other
Hmm.
end.
Hmm.
Now, I mean that sort of applies for a lot of things, but the school of wisdom is that there's the innovators and the early adopters, which are about 14% of the population within a company or whatever, and those are really the only people that you need to persuade and take with you. The rest will follow on, and the laggards, well, they're never going to do it anyway. So in a small population, like a small business, that 80-20 represents it sort of becomes a little bit distorted, and if it's sort of, you can imagine grandparents, mum and dad, and one or two kids are the company, are the board. If it's 80-20 and you've only got half a dozen people, it becomes very, very fractious and heavily sort of weighted. So that's one of the problems for small business, apart from the family politics.
Hmm.
So yeah, for larger companies, why is it so difficult? Well, um, one can beat management round the stick with a head with a big stick if one wants to, but there's just there's I think the biggest problem is communication.
Mm.
Most people, if they see a good reason for changing, a good reason for transforming, they'll go with it. They do, as we know, like the what's in it for me sort of question. If they instantly see something for them, then yes, they'll go with it. But sometimes maybe, well, yeah, it's something in it for me. Oh, there's something in it for my mate as well. It's very good. Sometimes you get people who just see the future and say, yeah, that's great. That's the way we must go.
Hmm.
You have to communicate that sort of vision. You have to be able to paint a picture
Hmm.
of what the future looks like. Because if it doesn't, I mean, the old learning styles thing went a long time ago, but there are people who think in different ways. So
Hmm.
the people around the boardroom table say, this is our vision for the future, and produce a document. Who the heck's going to read it?
Hmm. Hmm.
It produces a picture or a
Yeah.
model or, you know,
Yeah.
whatever, then people are more likely to buy in. Once you've got the communication issue sorted, you start to get to those 14% in a bigger company much, much easier,
Yeah.
I think, anyway.
Yeah. I'm going to pick up on a few of those things, and they all resonate with me, Derek. So one of them is that bell curve of change, if you want to call it, the getting the innovators and the early majority or scarce majority on board. In my early career, I spent a lot of time with the laggards, trying to get them on board, spending amounts of energy, time, and actually they lapped it up. They loved it because they were getting lots of attention. But did that really help them get on board? No. And as I started in the tech and digital world and try to bring in new processes or new systems or just business changes as a rule, I ended up realizing that you've got to go with those guys. There's always people in that 14%. They're always looking for the future. They're always looking for growth. They're always looking for opportunities to develop themselves. And while they're developing themselves, they can develop the organization and the vision of all the strategic objectives of the business and the organization. So spending time with them, creating that majority, so it becomes more just the innovators and the champions. You get the early adopters, then you get the majority adopters, and when you reach that, there's a chasm I found. There's a tipping point. You find a tipping point, and you just feel that the majority are going to come with you, and then you find there's a lot of peer pressure on the laggards, and the laggards won't tell you, but they will adopt it silently, or they disappear. That's what I find. That's what I found in many of my big, large transformation programs, be it across, irrespective of the size of the organization. So that really resonates with me. And comms, you mentioned communication. Uh, the larger the organization, the more comms you got to do. I think what I've realized is you to be that leader, you've got to um, not only get this sponsorship and the buy-in, and the way that you do that is that you communicate your vision to as many people as you can, as quickly as fast as you can. But it's not then once you've communicated and you start designing it, is let it go. Because what people I find is, I guess we got it going, it's all working, starting to work, and then it drops because the energy drops. What you've got to continue to do in the kind of incubation phase and the early adoption phase is continue to communicate the vision, but the benefits and the value that you can attribute to things that you've delivered or achieved. So continuous delivery incrementally has become something that has become my mantra. I've done big bang changes where it's really destabilizing. There's a restructure, there's reorganization, and people are coming in, going out, and it really causes chaos. But whereas if you do it slowly, surely, incrementally, and you're adding things, and what I'm really talking about is being agile. People talk about, I'm not talking about agile software development. It's about being agile in your organization, about tweaking things as you go along, and making those changes, and the small changes add up to being something bigger. But as you go along that journey, communication upwards, downwards, sideways, um, is so important, because you've got to sell it to the guys, on the troops on the ground. You've got to sell it to the board, the investors, board of directors, the C-suite, the senior managers, the guys on the ground who know their subject matter. They've got to buy into it as well. So um, I suppose I'm just reflecting back on what you said with some positivity, I suppose.
Yeah, typical consultant tells me what I already knew in a different
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
But in a way, though, that is the nub of it, because there are so many different ways of doing these sorts of communications, and one of the things I was thinking of just then is there's two things. The thing you mentioned about incremental stuff,
Hmm.
and also I was thinking about the difference between corporate culture and organizational culture.
Hmm.
So the corporate culture, yeah, as we know, gets handed down from the top. But at some point, those things have got to become embedded or part of the organizational culture. So you can't keep communicating from the top.
Hmm.
And one of the things I designed, if you like, a long time ago was a way of change, of spreading and reinforcing change, which was, and as you know, I like metaphor and things like that. I based it on the idea of throwing stones into a pond and the ripples spreading out. So this was not coming down from the top. This was all going from everywhere.
Hmm.
So the point was that the news, if you like, the ideas could spread outwards, but the ripples also worked in reverse. So you could suck in stuff from the company. You could listen to the well, you just pick up on the waves. To go back to our elementary school physics, you pick up on the wave patterns, but it's all at a low level. Once it's all at a low level, it's part of the organizational culture, part of the fabric, and people just won't. Um, they don't. Well, you can't reject that once it's part of what you chat about in your tea breaks or around the boardroom table or on the way to work. Once it's at that level,
Yeah,
you've got them, so to speak, haven't you? Really.
yeah, and those ripples, um, you got to capture the what those ripples mean. So
Mm,
and you've also got to be politically aware of how you continue the ripples, because there's usually hidden teams, groups, conversations in organizations. You can't be party to every conversation, every forum, but you've got to know what those hidden forums, groups, and teams are, to have people working with you on those comms into those, uh,
mm,
because there's always there's always going to be a degree of unrest. There's always going to be a degree of, that won't work here. This is the way that we've always done it. Um,
mm,
and how and the points I'm trying to get to is the people, those innovators, and those people who are your champions and are kind of running with the change. they have a mindset which is different to those other mindsets. How do you fuse one mindset into the other? How do you get people, and this is a question, I suppose, people to unlearn and learn quicker? So unlearn the older ways and adopt the new ways because they're going to give us something different. How do you switch from one mindset to the other?
Interesting. The thing that makes it particularly interesting, you have to overcome that sort of mentality which says, I'm not doing that. That's not in my job description,
Mm,
which is quite difficult. And that's a whole new ball game, really. Effectively making sure you have the right job descriptions based not necessarily on what people do, but on what the company does, so that people have their part to play. I mean, people will be quite. I mean, take a very, very simple example of loading up a lorry. If the job for a group of 6, 8, 10 people is to load up a lorry within a certain time and get it driven away with all the product on board, they, and especially if you don't sort of interfere with what they do, as long as they know they're not supposed to damage the goods, damage the lorry, and all the other parameters, they will probably do it quicker than you ever thought they could. But if you start trying to say, well, only one person can drive the forklift, you guys have got to do this, or you guys have got to do that, and then you impose a change on that, people will wonder, how does it all work? And one of the things is if you give people more autonomy, they will surprise you. I mean, a
mhm,
brilliant example I came across is there was a series a long time ago. It was called the BBC. It was called the BBC's Business Doctor, and the guy who was the business doctor, Paul, he went into basically a local authority, and
mhm,
and they were going to reorganize the bin men, basically.
mhm,
A more shall we say, vociferous group of people you couldn't wish to meet. And their method of dealing with it was to, or rather, his experiment, if you like, was to get rid of middle management, tell the guys what was going to happen, say, well, you can have, if you want a manager there, you can have them there, but otherwise get on with it. And they completely reorganized themselves once they realized it wasn't a trick. They could do everything, so they reorganized the routes. They made recycling more efficient.
mhm,
They reduced expenditure on safety shoes and overalls and all these things, that they knew about. As you
mhm,
said, they're the subject matter experts,
mm,
not the people who sit around the big table saying. I mean, in fact, one of the stupid things they did was get a consultancy in with some special software to rework all the routes for the bin lorries. Until
mhm,
till one of the bin men said to them, "You do realise, first of all, that you're going uphill, not downhill, and it's much easier to go downhill on this particular road. And also, you'd be at that junction
mhm.
when the schools are going in. Just little things like
Yeah,
that."
yeah,
And Mrs. Jones would ring up and say, "Oh,
yeah,
my bin's been left," but they were given the phone numbers of the lorry drivers rather than the council.
yeah,
So the lorry driver would say, "Oh, we forgot Mrs. Jones's bin. Let's go and get it."
yeah.
But the bizarre thing at the end of it was the bosses wouldn't believe that the complaints had gone down to zero,
Mm, okay.
because everything was being handled.
Yeah,
And they did it with transport, with recycling, with the bins. They did it with several different departments. and some elected to have the bosses back because of the knowledge they had, and some of them said no, we don't want them back at all, which was a bit of a blow. But
Well, I, I just want to expand on that because it's a really fundamental point, Derek. So there's a difference between a manager and a leader.
oh yes,
Yeah. And what you described was managers who are dictatorial, but and I'm generalizing here. You
yeah,
know,
there was
this is
the odd leader, but yeah, you when you get multiple layers, you get multiple managers, unfortunately.
that's right, and they are. This is your role. This is your task, and I'm going to track you on this task. And I'm kind of making this, I'm exemplifying this to make my point. Whereas a leader is the one who says, "We have a problem. Here's the problem statement, guys. You've got the brain power and the expertise. Go and work out the solution and fix the problem." Which is back to your point about giving people autonomy and empowering them to make the change themselves. And again, about 5, 10 years ago, I realized as I was, you know, working in many organizations is that as a leader, what you need to do is what we do in organizations is create job descriptions and vertical organizational charts, and we shoehorn people into particular areas. What we need to do is think horizontally and give people the autonomy and the power and provide them with the processes, the tools, the investment, and the frameworks so that they can go and the solution to the problems that the business has, or the strategy or the business objectives that the organization are trying to achieve. And that is an agile. Let's call it. I'm gonna talk some consultant speak. Agile digital mindset. A digital mindset is one where you're empowered to go and innovate. You're given the time to go and innovate with your team so that you can do your hackathon or your brainstorm and you come up with a solution. And then you're empowered, but where your leader, not your manager, but your leader, to go and make. You've got to validate the solution. You've got to see if it's scalable, but then it gives them gives it the opportunity to kind of make the case for the investment to scale, say the pilot or the MVP or the solution that they've come up with. Now, that was what I was thinking as you were talking about that example in the local government where the manager was saying, "This is we're going to bring in new software. This is how it's going to work." Whereas compared to the leader will say, "Look, guys, we've got a problem here. How are we going to solve it? How are we going to go about it?" Giving them the creating an environment for them to be successful.
Yeah, it goes back to well, people think I'm mad because I use metaphors quite
Hmm.
a lot. But one of my metaphors, well, I'm developing a new talk which will be interesting in a few weeks' time to let it rip. But one of my metaphors for organizational structure is literally a bowl of soup.
Hmm.
With the idea being that the soup represents the culture that we were talking about earlier, and we are the vegetables and the croutons that
Hmm.
float about in the soup. So
Hmm.
there's and everybody, everybody in the organization is an expert in something.
Hmm.
The guy who sweeps the floor, he's an expert in cleaning. He can probably clean the floor very efficiently given the right tools. The machine operators, but even some of the managers, there are very good managers who are expert in managing. There are things that need to be managed. You
Hmm.
can't get away from
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
So but get away from this idea of hierarchical control.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that and it removes the problem of the Peter principle. People wanting to be promoted to get more money, but they become less and less able to do the jobs that they're promoted into. So it all
Yeah.
depends on skills and experience,
Yeah.
and effectively lines of communication rather than the lines of control which are drawn
That's
in a
right.
normal hierarchy.
Yeah, and I want to say that I'm not anti organizational structures because what they are there for, they should be paths of escalation and succession planning for the future. But they
Oh
shouldn't
yeah.
be, but they shouldn't be control mechanisms. Yeah,
No, no, no. They're the bowls for the soup. To quote,
yeah,
to go
yeah.
back to my metaphor. But yes, the
I'll give you an
I mean,
example. I'm going to give you an example. I've been working with a institution, and we're working on a cloud program. And the cloud architect, we've been working on phase one. But I said to him, "What about phase two?" He said, "Oh, hold it. What do you want? What's phase two about?" I said, "Well, that's what I want you to work on. I want you to start thinking about phase two. You've been working on phase one." He goes, "Cool, we don't do that. We don't think ahead." I said, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm giving you the autonomy to. I'm allowing you to think
mm,
outside the box. Let's have a discussion." So I've been having some discussions with him. I don't know about. Let me just. I've been talking to him about multi-cloud strategies. I've been talking to him about CI/CD pipelines. These are all kind of technical terms. I don't, I can explain what they are, but then I've been talking about how we measure value, cost. How do we, move from a capex opex model? How we thought about compute power for innovation, and so that we can do some pilots and stuff. He goes, yeah, they're all great ideas. Yeah, let's. So it's the message really, Derek, is there's more than more knowledge and expertise in individuals in organizations, but they're in the soup, but sometimes they're stuck in the soup, but they're not allowed to maneuver around the soup
yeah.
to
The
to,
soup,
to capture.
the soup needs a stir.
He needs a
But I
stir.
mean, but there are. I come across wonderful examples before of people just well, two examples. For one is skills that people have that nobody has ever thought about using in the workplace. You might find that your receptionist is nobody's really worried about where she's worked or where they have worked before, but they're actually a very good welder,
Mm.
or something like there's skills like that all over the place. But the other one was it was partly due to the company, but it was Eddie Stobbart.
Oh yeah,
Remember they
yeah,
started making the drivers feel a lot better by giving them shirts and ties and things, so they were more professional. But they went beyond that. They gave them business cards so that when they were out delivering, they would also act as intelligence gatherers.
Mm.
So, um, and it wasn't an example of them doing that in this country was one that stuck to mind. But it was a transport company in the States, and what actually happened was they were dealing with Kellogg's, I think it was, and
Hmm.
their lorries, two different haulage companies, were actually um, visiting the same site, and they were basically going there half full. So, and basically the intelligence gathering said, you do realise that so and so and so and so is going there half full. Well, so are we. Could we not put our loads together so that the lorries go there full? And it's just little things like that. So not just skills,
Hmm.
but knowledge and know-how can be picked up as long as you've got a way of either storing it or spreading it.
Yeah.
And in fact, there was I can't remember the name of the company now. It was a long time ago. It was a mobile phone company based in Swindon.
Hmm.
And anybody who's listening will know the company when we describe it. They had a sort of it looked like a long Swiss roll made of glass was their business. And they had all sorts of cool things, like you could tell which floor the lift was at by how high the fountains were
Hmm.
outside, and this sort of thing. But one of the ways they gathered information and disseminated information was with tea ladies,
Mm.
simply because that somebody had asked the question, who or what is it that has access to the whole company, to everybody in the building? And it was the ladies that went round with the tea trolleys.
Mm. Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so
So So what I was thinking as you were talking there was about knowledge and knowledge management. Again, our organizations typically tend to fragment knowledge. One of, and being from the tech world, I work, we in a lot of the IT departments where I work in have a service desk, right? And the service desk is supposed to be the fountain of technology knowledge, right? So if there's a problem, say with Office 365, with Teams or your CRM platform, your ERP system, you can call them up, you get a friendly face, and then you log your ticket, and then you can go and get somebody to kind of a remote onto your laptop or your Surface Pro or wherever you might be in the office or out in the world, and fix your problem. That's the traditional model. Why can't we take knowledge to those users?
Mm,
Why is it so hard to get knowledge to those users so they can fix it themselves?
yeah.
Yeah. It's the same with the NHS, right? We have all these fantastic doctors and nurses full of knowledge, and we have people with problems at home. If we could empower those people, citizens, with the knowledge to how to fix their minor ailments, our backlog of NHS appointments would probably dwindle. Um, and I think this is another problem that we've struggled with. It's not just in technology, just generally. How do we share and disseminate knowledge so that it's one, digestible, and it's relevant, and it's on point, and maybe it is the dinner ladies or the cleaning ladies who can just put, depending on the context, obviously, of the organization, be able to share the information easier, quicker, faster, better. Um,
Yeah, I think one of the things is also to stop. I tried to stop using the term knowledge management because
right.
everybody I knew who worked in IT immediately thought something on computers.
Yeah.
Because if you have this disjointed knowledge base, shall we say, if you could then digitize it, even if it's not properly integrated, it's quicker to access. Put it
Hmm.
on a computer, but not everybody accesses computers, and so I just started referring to it as know-how. So
Hmm.
it could be stored on a computer, it could be in a book. I mean, we've got how many I mean, I know we moan about the libraries disappearing, but we've still got thousands of them, and all the books that are out there. People digest knowledge, with podcasts and all sorts. People tell stories in pubs. Um,
Yeah, and people learn in different ways, Derek. People digest and learn in different ways. Now, I know that I love a good interaction, just like the one we're having, where I'm picking up some tips and tricks. So people like to bounce ideas off others. Some like to sit in a classroom. Some like to just sit in a corner, listen to a podcast or a briefing, some classroom-based technology course. And we've got, again, it's about understand. I'm coming back to our earlier discussion around understanding people and our personas. If we can understand people, human behavior, what ticks them off, not ticks them off, doing some analysis and impact assessment on our personas or where we're trying to make change happen, and empowering them with knowledge and giving them the information in their various forms, wouldn't that help
mm.
to
It's
to
interesting. Yeah, it's
yeah.
interesting that we've in the past. Well, not in the past. We do it now. So much. There's been so much effort put into the sort of customer experiences and
Mm,
users, and there's a whole big thing about it. And I'm sure if you look at the consultants' classified job ads, everybody's in their customer experience and everything.
mhm,
Uh, Not quite so much, but from the HR side, perhaps about the employee experience, the individual experience.
mhm,
What are people's preferences? How do they like to be treated? How do they like to be? I wouldn't say managed, led from a bit better. So yes, there's.
Let me add to that. Again, I've been working with an, an education institution, and I was looking at student satisfaction. And you know what the biggest issue they had was communication. They said they want they wanted responsive communication to their inquiries. They didn't want it to be 3 months down the line. They wanted it within a day or two. I mean, that's not impossible with the modern technology. Uh, so there was this theme about how do we provide the right processes, tools, and responsiveness to meeting student needs? Because I've worked in higher education quite a lot, and it's becoming very competitive because you're attracting students, UK international students, and if you're not responsive to them, they can go elsewhere now, or they can do it in a modular basis themselves. They can educate themselves these days. So,
Mm,
you're going to lose students, and student equals income equals fees means um, it's valuable, right? So it's about again understanding needs, um,
mm.
personas.
Yes, that word persona.
Yeah, yeah. What's that
Oh,
conjure up for you?
oh, you don't want to know. You don't want to know. You really don't want to know. But it is something that is used in. I don't know if it's used badly, but
Okay.
I think it's used a lot with people assuming that the people who are listening to what they're saying know what they're talking about.
Hmm.
It's just like saying, well, are you going to come round? Are you going to come round for dinner tonight? Without explaining what you're going to get for your food, there's just an assumption that you know what's for dinner.
Yeah.
What is a persona? What does it actually mean? What do you use it for? What do you do with it?
Hmm.
And in some cases, you might be right. Some cases, the views overlap. In some cases, they don't really at all. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Eh, yeah. I think I get the gist of what you're saying, and but why shouldn't you? I mean, the underlying core principle for me is understanding what you're trying to deliver and who and how you make it valuable. But I was talking to a bunch of um, cohorts or teams around change just yesterday, and one of the guys was saying, "Oh, I have lots of these calls from various people, but I can't quite get them, convince them to do what I want them to do or adopt this and that." I said, "Well, have you understood them? What makes you believe that they're going to fall in love with what you're saying and move from X to Y? If you haven't understood their needs, their context, their
Mm,
challenges, what's going on with them, how would you have a conversation with a senior person who is in his own right has his own ego in a way, right? How would you butter somebody up so that you can get them onto your agenda?" And I said, you need to do some analysis. You need to do some analysis on the individual, what ticks them on and off, what they work on, what they're great at, and play to that a little bit. And to me, that's all about understanding the persona, right?
yeah, that echoes something that one of my Indian friends was
Mm.
telling me. It was about where it goes back to the time when everybody was trying to grapple with Zoom. As COVID hit, so all
Yeah.
the lecturers were basically sitting in front of Zoom, just reciting their notes and all of this stuff. And one of the lecturers was berating his students for just not getting it.
Mm.
And the message then came back very loud and clear. Well, why don't you just teach us in a way that we can understand? And that was quite a sobering lesson. And then I had somebody else, a lady teaching she was teaching English, and she said, "Well, it's very, very difficult. How do I teach English literature?" And I said, "Well, why can't you make podcasts and videos and other things like that? Make it interesting."
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the other faculty members came in and said, "Oh, but it's not our job to actually create feature films with our students." And he just didn't get it. The focus was on the creating of the video, not on what the video actually meant.
The content.
And that sort of goes in with something again I was thinking about. I do far too much thinking, but was the idea of well, in this case, it was secondary creativity. So the question is, if I paint something really, really interesting, which I think might be creative, and then I go and display it at a gallery where people go and look at it, where is the creativity? Now, actually, the creativity is at the point where the real creativity is at the point where the people observe your painting. That's where the real creativity is. And that gets over the argument where, you say, is an artist creative? Well, if he uses the same paints, the same brushes, the same size canvas, probably not. But if you can either reach a different audience, or you can get a different reaction or experience for that audience, then the secondary creativity is changing. And it's the same particularly with teaching.
Right.
You can use the same tools, the same mix, the same spoon to stir up the soup, if you like, but you can get a different reaction from the consumer of whatever it is which could be creativity, it could be knowledge, it could be part of the
I lost you there, Derek.
that go out.
Oh, but you're back. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Glitch. Little glitch.
Yeah, a big glitch. It said one of your streams is having problems, and I thought, well,
okay.
Well, we'll have to see about that. But yeah, that's the issue. There's a lot to think about in the well, it centers on the HR space, but it affects the whole of an organization.
Okay, so let me the thought that you triggered off in me as you were talking about students and curricula and content was innovation, and the rage at the moment is AI, right? And I've been working on an AI pilot, which using an LLM model where we throw coursework at the LLM model and it learns all the coursework. Then that model is available to students to ask questions about the coursework, and the answer, and then they provide answers. And I saw the results of the pilot and the student engagement, how it's increasing all the time. No human intervention, right? Apart from training the model and giving the coursework, but it's that. Would you call that an innovation, Derek? And it comes back to the difference between R&D and maybe innovation, and how quickly we're in this world, because AI is the rage. Just your thoughts around that.
I don't think if somebody said I'm using AI, I'm innovating. A few months ago, I might have agreed because it was innovative, it was different, etc. Now I would say no. But the people who it's the uses to which people are putting it that are innovative. So different types of learning. What do you? People can be filtering patterns in all or in data and things that we just haven't got time to do. So there's an awful, people. I've seen people combining it with robotics. I mean, I don't know. Have you seen the robot that plays table tennis?
I think I saw that. He was which Chinese player was he beating? Was it the world
I
number
don't
one?
know, but this guy, I mean, apart from the fact he looked like a robot, you'd say, oh yeah, he's playing table tennis. And then at the end, you think, oh, he's beaten, and just nonchalantly he flips his bat behind his back and plays the winning shot whilst walking away from the table. And
Wow.
I thought, you couldn't do that just by training a robot. So, but yeah, I think it's the uses to
Yeah.
which people are putting it, and it's the same with all sorts of tools. There are tools that have been around for ages, and I'm not sure we need to search for. Well, if new ones come along, fine, but we don't need to search for new ones when there are so many that people haven't combined to
Mm.
get them.
Yeah, the difference is now we have the computing power for these models to learn faster, quicker, better, right?
Indeed.
That's the difference. The AI was around, I don't know, 30s, 40s, 50s. It's been around a
Yeah,
long time. It's just that we have the computing power, which gives us the speed for them to learn and train them up so that they can respond quicker. Yeah.
indeed.
Um,
Well, I hate to say this. Do you realise how long we've been chatting for now?
Probably too long. I don't know. Or too short.
For
No, 40 minutes.
47 minutes of
Wow.
pure what's the word? Pure gold for anybody that is actually
Still
listening
listening.
in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we could keep going all day.
Yeah.
I said there could be a series of this stuff, couldn't there?
Oh, now you're asking, Derek. Well, we could call it jabbing gold dust. How about that?
Well, yeah, we could call it all. We could call it all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I hope people have been dialing in or listening in to our stream. I hope it's been insightful or useful.
Hmm.
There's nuggets they've picked up. Love to hear from people. Love to answer any questions that you might have, Derek, or others.
Yeah, and just as we finish off, if anybody wants to go and have a look at some of Kuldip stuff, you can basically look at innovative quality solutions / lots of different things. So news insights, simulation training, about and webinars, of course. And of course, you can go and find Kuldip on LinkedIn. He's always there.
Yeah.
So yeah. So anyway, a big thanks to Kuldip for having a lunchtime chat. It's been fun. Hope people listening have found it interesting, and hopefully we'll be back at some point in the not too distant future. So
Yeah.
I'll say goodbye to Kuldip. It sounds like a children's program, doesn't it? Goodbye.
I've enjoyed it, Derek.
Good.
It's been good
And
fun.
okay, right, fair enough. So goodbye to Kuldip. And yeah, there will be a replay, obviously, on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. So if you want to go and have a look at that, you can do. So without further ado, I'll sign off and let everybody get back to work. So bye for now.